We are just days away from SuperCoach opening for 2025. Kind of. The team picker is what I'm alluding to. This is for gold subscribers that have paid some hard-earned cash during the year to get some additional bonus features. One of the things that come your way as a cherry on top of being a gold subscriber is, well, you gain access to the format, start to pick a team, see all of the player prices and positions well ahead of the official opening that lands in January. At time of recording, the team picker is alluded to be coming early in the next few days, but is not yet landed. We've got to get to the opening of SuperCoach Big Bash, don't we? But before all of that, before the format opens and before we hit Christmas, I thought I'd deliver to you my way too early best 23 of 2025. Yep, that's right. The addition of the flex means I want to tell you what I think are going to be the optimal 23 players without, of course, forecasting and guessing who may or may not be awarded an additional position that lands during the season. Gonna keep it pure. Let's head straight to the back line. Who do I think are going to be the best defenders for 2025? Here's my 6. Lachie Whitfield. Undeniable how good he was last year and undeniable how strong a scoring prospect he is. The only real reason you couldn't put Lachie in your best 23 for SuperCoach is simply you think that inconsistency around his body and durability is pretty heavy. He's just not there enough. To me, I just view him as one of, if not the best defender rolling around for us in SuperCoach for yet another season. And barring injury, I just don't see a way how he's not in the top 6 defenders for 2025. In at D2, yeah, I got him in an order, I suppose. In at D2, Harry Sheezel. Pure defender. I'll be honest, I thought he'd be a defender mid, but we will take it because it opens up a small skerrick of opportunity that we might get him as forward eligible. Maybe. Let's not get too keen on it, but it's a possibility. Harry's been a star. Even when he's moved into this midfield and mid-forward role that he held late last year, he still find a way to score really, really nicely for us. So to me, Harry Sheezel's going to sit in at D2. I think he's going to be one of the best defensive options yet again for us in 2025. D3 in my top 6 defenders as a part of my top 23 best options for SuperCoach this year. I've got Jack Sinclair. So good, so consistent for so long, even with the arrival of a couple of players into the midfield mix and into the defensive line with a Toby Travalia. I still just genuinely trust and believe that Jack Sinclair is going to be amongst the best defenders for us this season. So consistent, finds a way to score on transition, still wins contested ball, gets involved in scoring chains. He really does everything we want from a rebounder. And even with a Wanganeen Miller, McRae, and some good draft crop kids coming through, I still find it hard to believe he's going to be any real distance away from the top 6 defenders. So for me, I got Jack in at my D3 spot. D4, maybe this is controversial, but I got Luke Ryan. There's so much heat in the community that his back end of the year was so poor, and it's fair, but the reality is his ability to read the ball, to intercept, to peel off, and then to control the play for Fremantle in that defensive half, he is made for SuperCoach. The way he takes his kicks is so favourable to scoring. Where he wins his intercept possessions, the way he uses the ball, it's pure SuperCoach. So to me, barring an unforeseen drastic role change that kind of really eats at some of his scoring elements of intercepts, kick-ins, and being the primary ball user by foot, not just ball movement with run and carry, I just see him in there. So, yeah, it's not as favourable and attractive as it might have been to some or as definitive. I still just don't see how he's not in the top 6 unless something drastically comes his way. All right, let's start to change up some options, go a little bit more speculative. This guy's changed teams, and it's not as favourable for SuperCoach. But if he's got the role that I think he does and the players around him, despite moving clubs, I still think Dan Houston's going to be one of the best SuperCoach defenders for us this year. He's going to have that key ball movement out of defence with a Nick Dacos almost exclusively now to me inside that midfield mix. I just see Dacos doing so well in there, but I also see Houston being such a prime ball movement option, rebounding off halfback, getting involved in those scoring chains, getting involved in that intercept and rebound game that in their premiership year was so strong. And Nick Dacos, before the midfield move, was so super coach strong at scoring in. So to me, I think I got Dan Houston just moving up a little bit and sitting in that spot. And then the last, Bailey Dale. Slow start last year, strong middle portion. I'm really confident that Bailey Dale's going to continue to be that core ball movement option by foot, coming off that halfback. There's no competition for spot there with a Caleb Daniel now out of the mix. If Johannesson could stay fit, there's your run and carry. I know there's some other options that they're investigating and experimenting through the preseason, but gosh, it's not even Christmas. The format's not open. You want me to pick a sixth defender. I got it. I think Bailey Dale, those are my top 6 defenders for my pre-Christmas edition for SuperCoach. Let's jump into the mids. Can you really not have Bontempelli in here? I just don't think so. I don't see the pathway to scoring drop-off. He's just been the most durable, reliable, consistent midfielder we've had for such a long period of time now. If you don't have Bontempelli in your best midfielders in SuperCoach, you are reaching as far as I'm concerned and really just trying to be controversial for the sake of it. So for me, he's in there. If there's someone who I think could be M1, but I've currently got at M2, to me, it's Zach Butters. He is SuperCoach. Everything about how he goes about winning the ball, where he wins the ball, how he uses it, how critical he is to his team success, score involvements, and inside 50 entries. He's so strong in those elements and areas, but he's not just a loose ball player. He's so strong at the defensive side that he's winning tackles and he's winning contested ball. Everything about this guy's game is SuperCoach. If there's anyone that could dethrone Marcus, to me, I've got Zach. So Zach Butters in at M2. M3, I'm going big on Nick Dacos. I think him with another full preseason of training, another full season, and some hopeful more support from guys like a Jordan DeGoey, if he can get his injury woes on top of them. I just think that's going to help support and draw out more SuperCoach scoring from Nick Dacos. Again, if I was to give me 2 options that could outscore Bontempelli, first would be Butters. Second, I'd have to say it's going for Nick Dacos. I think he's going to be, yet again, such an absolute star for us in SuperCoach. Let's expand it out in M4. I'm going Caleb Sarong. Much like his teammate in Luke Ryan, flew out of the gate and then just wavered off, given such a strong start. But to me, that defensive work rate, that offensive presence, his running patterns, how he gets involved in the game, to me, he's got a ceiling that it would not shock me if he hit a 200 this year in SuperCoach, given how he goes about playing the game and just how I think Fremantle's forward of the ball structure and the playmakers in and around it should only aid his scoring and see some bump with some of that team being able to convert his ability to bring the ball inside 50 and get involved in that scoring chains and score involvement. So to me, I can see a real elevation of his scoring. In next, Tom Green. That early season injury last year really set him back. But to me, I still see a world where he's going to go 115 in SuperCoach. It would not shock me if he ever crunched it past the 120 marker. He is the lead giant in that midfield now, and everything about him just screams SuperCoach scoring to me. I'm very bullish on him again in 2025. Maybe I'm transferring my Josh Kelly affinity over to Tom. Who knows? But to me, I've got him sitting in at M5. So Bont, Butters, Dacos, Sarong, Green. Who are my next 3 mids that I'd be saying? I'm big on the rebound of Jordan Dawson this year. The problem with him last year was so much of the Crows were dysfunctional that he became the reason to solve that problem. So he moved off to the wing when they needed that transition. He moved to half back when they needed to intercept and control the play. He moved him forward of the ball when they needed a goal and some presence to push up the ground. to me, I feel like the Crows, with what they've done at the recruiting table, have fixed some of those issues that they had through the midfield with the addition of Peatling, the presence up forward with pressure and leadership in Neil Bullen, and some run and carry and rebound with Isaac Cumming, let alone the drafting of Sid Draper. So you put all those kind of elements together, and to me, it just looks like this is the spot for Dawson. And if they're going to use any player as a bit of a gap filler, keep an eye on Dan Curtin as the player to do that. I think he's going to go back to his all-Australian scoring season where he was one of the best SuperCoach players rolling around for us. Then our final two midfield spots for me, Lachie Neale. It might be the last year he's at the peak of his powers, and whether or not he can get back to the mountaintop yet again after finally winning that elusive premiership, we'll have to wait and see. But to me, he does feel like this is the last hurrah of Lachie Neale, but he just finds a way to score so well, doesn't he? This Brisbane team hasn't got any worse in the off-season. I know the retirement of Joe Danaher does scream a big absence and cavity on that forward line, but I think with any absence of Danaher, the arrival back of Coleman into the half-back space, the arrival of the Levi Ashcroft via the draft, let alone the maturing, proper grammar, MJ, the aging and the improvement of players like a Will Ashcroft. I think Cameron Rayner has only gotten better. Those key position forwards still feel like there's a bit of development in them. So I just don't see the fall away from Neale. I think the hunger's there. I know the tag will come a couple of times in the year, but for every 70 game he gives you with a tag, he'll pop a 160 game that kind of balances it out. We're talking about averages, and so for me, I've got him in at M7. And then much like I did in the back line, where Dale for some might be a little speculative, I've gone speculative in an M8. Christian Petrarca. Yep, I see him rebounding back to his best. For the better part of the last 4 seasons prior to his injury, he was just one of the most bulletproof premium midfielders rolling around for us. Barely dropped a score under 100. Was so reliable and so consistent at those 120-plus scoring and big ceiling games. I think he's got a point to prove, regardless of the narrative that happened in the offseason. I just see Christian Petrarca coming out off the back of some controversy and the physical challenges he had with that season-ending injury. He's the kind of ultimate professional player to me that I just can see him coming out firing in 2025. So for me, I've got Petrarca in at M8. So Bont, Butters, Dacos, Sarong, Green, Dawson, Neale, Petrarca. Let's get into the back portions, although we're heading to the ruck, the back portions of my best 23 for 2025. For SuperCoach, I'm going pretty boring in the rucks. Marshall and Cherry. I'll hear a conversation about Gawn. I'll hear a conversation about English. I'll even hear a conversation about Briggs. But you got to pick someone. And so to me, Cherry, I know those tackle numbers were uber high, but I think he's also probably their best defensive prospect through that ruck and midfield grouping. I also think with the improvement of midfield crop around him, with what he may lose out in that defensive work rate and tackles, we might be able to see some improvement around score involvements and hit-outs to advantage with just better options rolling through there through development and recruitment. So Cherry there. Marshall, not going to lie, it feels a bit lazy. I know they've just landed a couple of draftee rucks, with Dodson through the draft and Boyd as the SSP, but it feels like to me that they are running a sole ruck approach. And a Rowan Marshall in a sole ruck approach, just SuperCoach. Pure SuperCoach. So I'm throwing him in there. Let's head into the forward lines, and then I've got to tell you who I think my best flex is for 2025. Yeah, we're going to drop the 23rd player option in. Forward line, Jason Horne-Francis. I think he's my F1 this season. I think there's some really nice forward options that I think we need to have a conversation about during the 50 most relevant, which kicks off on January 1. But Jason Horne-Francis just feels like a gift. Whether or not he ends up seeing a percentage increase of time on ground or time at centre bouts, I think to a degree is irrelevant, just given the fact that how high his ownership is going to be and how good I think he is in both that forward half of the ground and through the work rate and work he does through the midfield. I think he's going to be the number one forward in 2025. There's a couple that could compete with it, but I think a lot of them have harder pathways to get there, whereas for Jason Horne-Francis, the franchise, is the one I'm most comfortable to dub the F1 of 2025. Going to stay in South Australia for F2, Isaac Rankin. His scoring, when he gets a presence through the midfield, not only where he can win centre bounces, not only where he can get involved in scoring transitions through the midfield and winning contested ball. What I love about seeing Rankin through the midfield is when he's in the midfield, I don't know too many teams that have the right midfield matchup to stop him for speed and power. And then when he goes forward, he kind of loses his midfield opponent, and the handover to the defensive player sometimes can get a little bit lost, and he finds himself with a half metre of space. And that's where we saw so many times last year that Rankin would be open in pockets of the forward half of the ground. And you'd hear the commentators go, how did Rankin get there? Well, it's because of his work rate at the centre bounce. Then he'd push forward into the forward line. And just that transition handover of opposition defender and mid sometimes was not clinical. And as a result, he got that half metre of space, which is just enough for him to impact and score goals. To me, if he stays fit, he could be F1, but I think with this increased midfield role that he developed last year, as well as what I think is an improved Crows forward and overall team performance, I think he's going to be one of the best forwards for us in 2025. Dylan Moore is not a popular pick. He's the number one guy by average at the moment, but to me, he just does all the things we want out of a forward, right? Kicks goals, defends well, pushes up the ground, gets involved in the hard work, puts the ball into the right places when he's got the ball so doesn't use it poorly, gets involved in scoring chains, gets back and helps on defence. He does all these key right elements, and he's not a one-dimensional player because he can win his own ball as well as get involved on transition scoring. So to me, I'm just really settled with him. I don't feel like there's the roller coastering of Mackay or Curnow, who on any given week could outscore more by 100 points. But also, I feel like there are also weeks where Moore could outscore those boys by 50 points and he still not even get 100. So for me, it's a very straight, predictable selection at F3, but I don't think we need much more than that. So for me, Dylan Moore sits in that spot. Caleb Daniel, he's going to be one of the players we talk about a lot through the off-season. He's going to be one of the most valuable players we can get given his price point. His proven scoring in the projected role that he's going to have at North Melbourne of what he's done at the Bulldogs. But to me, I think he's going to be one of the best forwards for us this year. We know he can hit premium territories as a defender in that role that he had at the Bulldogs. If he's anywhere near that role at North Melbourne, which he is training for pre-Christmas, this is a gift. Not just for what we're going to pay for him, but for what we need our forwards to do this year to be premiums. I think if you can scratch the itch of 100, which we know he can do in that role, let alone what North Melbourne players have done in that role, Sheasel, McKercher, Fisher, Hall, Zeeble, this has been a gravy space for us. If these two worlds combine, there is a world he becomes the F1. It's wild to say it, but there's a pathway to it. F5 for me is Bailey Smith. I'm not going to lie, getting speculative here for sure. Could I put the Mackays, the Curnows, the Jacksons? Yes, of course I could. Got to put someone. I'm putting Bailey Smith because I just think he's got the role that is favourable to scoring. I know he does butcher the ball at times by foot, but his work rate gets him to enough contests where I think he's going to give himself the avenue to scoring well enough in Supercoach. If you want to dive into his scoring a little bit more, go look at some of those seasons pre-knee injury when he had this midfield role at the Bulldogs. You actually see some really nice Supercoach scoring. So to me, I've got him in at F5. I am a little worried about how clinical his ball use can be. It's a little bit more rushed. It's certainly not the precision that we want and that gets rewarded in Supercoach. But I think for an F5 spot, I'm happy to make that prediction. And then at F6, I don't like this one. I really don't. Jack McRae. I could have gone just boring and gone Curnow. And I think he's going to be a good pick. It feels like I'm dogging on him a little bit. I'm not. But I just think the pathway to scoring for Macrae is there. He's going to get this midfield opportunity. St Kilda and the way they move the ball is very favourable to the way Macrae scores at his best. And so I think there's enough ways that pre-Christmas we're making a prediction who could be a top 6 forward for the year. Makes a bit of sense to go for a Jackson Macrae. And then who's my 23rd player with the arrival of the flex? Who do I think from all the other positions we might just need to squeeze another one in so that we can justify it? To me, it's Max Gawn. I said it with Cherry and Marshall. You could build a case that English sits in there, that Gawn sits there, and maybe a bit more speculative, but Briggs. To me, Max Gawn was so good last year. They have got a little bit more insurance policy through those tall stocks in the off-season, but I still think, given the list that they have, a premiership is still very much not only in vogue for Melbourne, I think it's still very much within their grasp. And if they're going to get there, it's through another dominant scoring season of Max Gawn. With a healthier and fitter Petrarca and Oliver, that should only bode improvement for what scoring happens around Max Gawn, let alone what he does in and of his own ability with intercepts and involvements around the ground. So to me, could I have put him at the rucks? Yeah, I could have, but wanted to just drag it out a little bit and find a way to get him in there. So who do I think is going to sit in that spot? I think it's Max Gawn. I think he's in the best 23 players for SuperCoach for 2025. It's before Christmas. It's before the team picker opens. But these are the players that I think are going to be the best options for us in SuperCoach for 2025. Do you agree or disagree? Comment below and let me know what you think. If you're enjoying what you're getting from the coaches panel this preseason already and you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Plenty of videos rolling right throughout the preseason. And from January 1, we start the countdown. 50 players over 50 days with the annual 50 most relevant countdown. An interactive conversation with members of the coaches panel and of the fantasy football community at large, looking who I believe are the most relevant players that we have to have a conversation about and that are ranked in an order that we need to unpack a narrative and look at them for our SuperCoach as well as the other fantasy formats for 2025. Hey, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for giving me your take on your 23 in the comments below. We can't wait to be back with you again real soon on the channel talking about your SuperCoach side.